Welcome to Ensemble Volume 15, The Future of Music, What's Next in Music, Side 2. So here we are again, and I've got my friend Jimmy Shaw, co-founder, guitarist, producer from the band Metrics, still hanging out with us. Thanks again for joining us, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So, when you think of hip-hop, a long time ago, you would not think of classical music, or when you think of classical music, you would not think of hip-hop unless the hip-hop production was sampling classical music, which we've heard in a few cases, and we're getting more and more of that in film scores. It's always sort of this marriage, and often feels a bit like a shotgun wedding between them.
Sure.
But there's this incredible band out of the Bay Area in California called the Ensemble Mik Nawooj, and they effortlessly combine from inception hip-hop and classical music.
Well, that's something I want to hear.
I'll be the phenom, my speech for a nominal fee. Pay homage to me, whether or not I got the prestige. The East Oakland author who's off of the seeds and talk of the streets, but talking on beats. I hope you touched. I got enough pull to keep y'all in my reach. I call it the squeeze, got the juice, got the release. I drive deep, been set it up for all my degrees. Phenomenal man phenomenally, man phenomenally, yeah. I'm in line with this, saying man, I'm legit. Name brand conglomerate, name stays anonymous. All over the globe, I sail away on the continent. Always saying my homes, I'm reclaiming my mind again. About to cross over from the lines of acknowledging. Bridging over waters in the fight with Leviathan. 5 men, hot-headed when using my hyacinths. Violence at the fair when advancing the sciences. Not for you, player, checking on your appliances. Trying to make sure that big brother is eyeing us. Staying in the mind is scared and they're living. I'm in the fair flare and the fair with Blair witches. Moving air with prayer, cherishing clear vision of judgment. Every line's a fair sentence. Ain't no giving in. I made my peace with oblivion. How you feeling, friend? How you feeling, friend? Have you made your peace with oblivion? Ain't no giving in. How you feeling, friend? How you feeling, friend? Have you made your peace with oblivion? Ain't no giving in. Ain't no giving in. Ain't no giving in. Ain't no giving in. Fear of oblivion. To look around and count your blessings. Looked around, decided to live and dispense with all the stressing. Have you looked up and seen everything beautiful? Like my daughter. She went from in utero to writing computer code, and truth be told, I didn't even want no kids, but it's funny how you once gonna lie with an untold bliss.
We are a hip hop orchestra based in Oakland, California, comprised of flute, clarinet, violin, cello, piano, upright bass, drums, a hip hop MC, turf dancer, and a lyrics Pratt.
When we talk about the future of music, and if we were talking about this 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 months ago, and even the conversations I've been having with colleagues over the last week or two, the thing that keeps coming up over and over and over is the future of almost anything is in the diversity in the repertoire, the diversity in the process, the diversity in the backgrounds of the people coming together to actually create things. And what the two of you have done seems to be almost the greatest actual realization of that kind of diversity. How did this come together?
It came to me as, at first, like a protest piece, protest music. What I mean by that is that when I was towards the end of my undergrad studies, studying composition, I felt that, after you learn basic techniques, you were getting into the realm of aesthetics. So you're learning, okay, this is the way to be avant-garde. I had to seriously think about what I did because, I thought I was a serious composer. I need to do this, but then I was sick of it. So I didn't know even hip hop. I not only did not know hip hop, I did not like hip hop. And I had actually went back and listened to hip hop and treated hip hop with respect, as much as respect that I had for, Western avant-garde classical music. And then I had a conversion experience when I listened to NWA's Straight Outta Compton. I felt like I was dipped into the river of hip hop and reborn as a free musician.
When I got involved in EMN, I kind of thought about how people look at music or things in this country, and ultimately it generally kind of boils down to race, and then sometimes that boils down even further to to money and class and so on and so forth. So I was like, okay, well, how do we get butts in seats? How do we get press to actually look at this type of thing? So the minute we started going to kind of giving the more story elements of what this ensemble looks like and what this ensemble kind of represents in this grand scheme of American culture, we started to get more traction from press and people. And then we also got some pushback from purists in the hip hop sphere, more specifically.
I've heard you talk about method sampling for some time. What is that?
Method sampling is this idea that it actually came out of the idea of sampling, right? So I extrapolate the idea and realized actually that much like hip hop producers that take elements from, literal material from the, records that are older, they find it in the crates, dig the crates, and then, they manipulate them by stretching them or chopping them really, really fine, shortly, and then inverting them, or, going backward and then put the beat on it. So you're making things with stuff that you already have, actually. You just find it, and then you have to reframe it, and then it becomes something new. I said, I'm going to use all this craft that I know, and with that, I'm going to make hip-hop music, the opposite thing. So then what happens? If I use stuff that I know really well, but go to a completely different environment as an aesthetic environment, an aesthetic sort of system, and then try to emulate it, you actually invent new things. You can innovate this way.
It's so hard to surprise or innovate in that way, Innovation is often this idea of technology, but innovation in terms of the way we connect or the way we present something, man, when that happens and you can surprise someone, there's nothing better. You have a real new, genuinely new relationship, and it's a two-way relationship.
And that's different than what European composers have been doing. There's something about crowdsourcing and opening things up that creates much more power than single person dictating what is going to be done, what's this way. meta sampling is essentially that. You can source from differences, and differences become power in a very specific way, because differences can be used against us to divide us, but differences can be used to create something really cool.
So Jimmy, I know you as someone much like myself who loves the tactility of analog equipment and the large knobs and the VU meters and all of that.
I know you don't seem like a guy that likes gear, you know? I only have 2 pieces of gear, man, you know, one on either side. That's all I got. My friend Kevin Drew released a record yesterday that he made primarily on his phone, you know, and the technology may have just gotten to where the technology is going to get to, and now people are just going to make whatever they want to make. And it seems like, from my perspective, the younger generations have way less lines between genres than we used to. You know, when me and you were kind of coming up, it was like, you know, you remember in high school, there would be like, you know, the goth kids and the rock kids and the blah, blah, blah kids. And, you know, it doesn't seem like that's really a thing anymore. It's like everyone's just an everything kid. And it's you either like music or you don't like music. And music is music. It doesn't matter if there's like a heavy metal riff or a hip hop beat. And, you know, they don't draw lines anymore. So that's kind of a cool thing. It's like the melting down of the things that used to keep different people apart, you know? So everyone's just kind of in there together now.
With an eye on technology, innovation, and the emerging roles in music publishing, let's regroup with our friends at the Music Publishers Canada panel.
My name is Keziah Myers, the Executive Director of Advance, and I think next in music is diversity.
I'm Nicole Pratt, Director of Administration at Anthem Entertainment, and I think what's next in music is technology.
I'm Margaret McGuffin. I'm the CEO of Music Publishers Canada, and the future of music is always the song. Who do you see working in the industry in 5 to 10 years? And what skills and what type of workforce do you want to see in the next 5 and 10 years?
Yeah, it's definitely going to look different than it did 5 years ago. And, 5 years before that, that's for sure. What I want to see, or what I think we will see in the music industry in 5 years, is this real appreciation of people who are able to analyze data. We're going to see the need for skills of people who are very, very focused on the details. We're going to need to continue to see people who, of course, have this love of music, but come from different industries. And as Advance, it's really important for us to look at the future of work and be able to train up those who may be in the industry right now, giving them the ability to pivot their knowledge or add to their personal toolkits, because for many people in the music industry, it is still central, but it's about adding that additional skill as to how do I understand what an impression looks like? How do I understand what a line item looks like? How do I aggregate this data and then explain this data to a client or to a songwriter or creator by way of a graph or a visual representation? So I definitely think we're going to continue in this trajectory of understanding data.
Any words on where you see your company or your career going in the next 5 to 10 years based on this conversation?
It's still going to be on creativity, but I think in a different way. I think we're always looking at innovation and people who have these creative ideas to do things differently. I think music and technology are going to get closer and closer together, and the emphasis will be on that technology and how we can look at the data. The data will always be there, but how can we look at it, and how can we be better partners and support our music creators in a way that will allow them to have longevity in this industry?
Yeah, we always want to look at broadening the people who enter into the music space. And growing up, I definitely saw a number of friends of mine who were in the music space and didn't understand that there were careers behind being a performer or a creator. But then there were those who actually weren't in the music space, but loved music. And I think the amazing part about this industry is that your love of music doesn't mean you need to play a particular instrument. It actually means that the skills that you have from whatever industry you're coming from are extremely valuable in the music industry. And outside of that detail, I also recognize that there are some communities that are told that music is not the way to go when we look at a career path. And because of the fear and the lack of security that one believes that they have. And so being able to enter into an industry with a skill set that you have acquired in your post-secondary studies or from another industry, being able to take that transferable skill into the music industry really broadens the spectrum of people that we can take from a global lens.
I think it's so incredible to hear about Advance within the Music Publishers Canada panel. Advance really celebrates not only the diversity of the workforce, but really the diversity of the cultures that we have here in Canada.
Looking at me, boy, you're looking at me, girl, you're looking at me, keeping that.
Tell me why the future of music and what's next in music really relies on organizations and the coming together of really unique creative minds to build something like Advance.
I think why Advance is significant for this country is because we've never had a collective that has successfully advocated for Black executives. How can I put it? We're now getting seats at the table. We're now having those opportunities to look at the music industry through a different lens. So what's happening now is, where before people that look like me, people that look like you may have not been able to contribute. So a lot of the times there was more of like a homogenous view as to what Canadiana was. Now it's very different to where there is, no pun intended, but there is a real reconciling that's happening now. There's a sad discovery, and when I say sad discovery, things that have been in existence for decades, some Canadians are now just discovering it today when it comes to music and the music business and outside of that, socially, culturally. So I think these collectives are going to be important because what's happening is when those voices come together, the voices are louder and we're able to project farther. And then now people are able to hear us. People don't understand what it means when people are talking about equality, especially around social justice. It's not that people want more than or special treatment. They're just trying to work their way up from like -4, to be on the same level. That's really what it's about. We're seeing a lot of incredible things happening now that there are a lot of different voices from the AAPI community, from the LGBTQI plus community, from the Black community, from the Indigenous community. There are a lot of things that are happening in a very small window of time. I think my only hope is that this is something that continues. It seems like now, I don't know why, maybe it's because the world stood still during the pandemic, but it feels like a lot more things are getting through to people's hearts, their souls, and their spirits. And that's what I like, is because when people are starting to actually digest what is happening, that's when we're seeing the actual change. So people were kind of forced to sit down and think. And people were saying, well, how are my actions or lack of actions affecting the way that things are happening within the world? And what I like is now people, it's more front of mind, and people are, being very intentional about the things they support, why they support them, who they support, and so forth.
You, as both an artist and an executive, as it comes to what's next in music and the future of music, do you have concerns that the platforms that are really amplifying artists are becoming shorter? And is that attention span something that we have to, frankly, buy into or fight?
I think anybody that fights progress usually loses. So there's probably people from the Motown era that are like, oh my God, the disco era was trash. Then the disco era was like, what is this hip hop? Hip hop is trash. And then there's hip hop purists that are like, oh, this drill stuff, it's driving me crazy. So there's always going to be an evolution of music. There's always going to be an evolution of the process. I think what it is, the people, again, that have seen the most success or have achieved a certain level of longevity, those are the people that have been able to navigate and adapt. And I think that's so important, especially now as technology plays such an intricate part of what it is that we're doing. You have to have adaptability, you know what I'm saying? Otherwise, you're gonna get left, in the dark. I think even creatively now that we're at a time where algorithms are playing such a massive part. Data, we're a very data-driven industry right now. So at a time when all these things matter so much to the people that are pushing the buttons, it's something to where, as an artist, even if you're not participating, you have to be aware of it. Yeah. And I think if you look at the people that have the ability to stick around and stay around and remain very influential, those are those people that have figured out how to combine, all those different worlds.
All those years ago, when you started out as a kid, what kept you moving forward?
Being able to execute at each level and continuing to build. I have very strong roots within, community organizations. I had very strong mentors. Those people really instilled certain qualities in me. So all this is now I have a bigger platform, I have a bigger reach, I have a bigger audience, but the same principles are there. And I think at the end of the day, if we look back at what was going on in the 90s, when you think about Rodney King verdict and the riots that were happening, and even here, the same things are happening decades later. The only difference is now I have a lot more people that are paying attention, a lot more people that not just are listening, but are also contributing and helping. As an artist, you do things where it's like, it's artist-centric and it's about your ego and your art and that whole nine, but the funny thing is, this is not really about me, it really is about the city. We're gonna be grieving together, we're gonna be thinking together, we're gonna be loving together, and we're gonna come out of this hopefully with an amazing sense of hope, an amazing sense of pride for our city. Hopefully, it'll inspire a whole gang of other people to do something similar, but in their own way.
It sounds like you feel the future of music, what's next in music, is really about community.
I think it always has been, though. The funny thing is pre-pandemic, and it's kind of sad, but it's like I saw the industry moving towards communal activities. We used to have these like coming home from school and everybody would go to, HMV or Sam the Record Man or play the record or whatever it is. But what's happening now is the festivals are the thing, to where they're spending all their money, maybe not on CDs, but they're gonna buy these different concert tickets and they're gonna have these experiences with their friends. And I think that is something that we cannot take for granted. What it is a need for people to experience things together. Because what's happening is we're on our phones, we're on our computers, and a lot of times these are very solo, singular activities that are happening. And I think at the end of the day, one of the things that the pandemic did prove, we need to be together. We want to be together. We desire to be together. So no matter what it is that happens in technology, the core of who we are, the basic human principles are still in effect. The humanity of it remains the same.
The human connection.
The human connection.
Sir, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
One of the great unsung heroes, but always endless stories in rock and roll mythology, are the artist managers.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Just unsung, right? I mean, crazy. You hear about
some of them are unsung, but then there's the Brian Epsteins. There's the there are stories about great managers, but most of them I think are probably untold.
Yeah, there's also stories about like great managers who maybe didn't behave so great, which made them even greater.
For sure. I mean, that's part of rock and roll mythology, right? It's like people love the idea of someone destroying something as much as they love the idea of someone building something. That's kind of why rock and roll is what it is.
Phoebe Salvador is originally from here in Toronto and is now living in Los Angeles. She's a remarkable artist manager who has been involved in the industry with artists from Nelly Furtado to Alicia Cara. You know what I really loved about Phoebe is she said, growing up in Toronto in the 90s, she didn't realize she was a person of color.
That's an amazing thing to hear someone say.
Isn't that an amazing thing to hear? And I knew exactly what she meant.
Yeah, I mean, I have idyllic memories of growing up in Toronto and how there was definitely a period of time where when I look back, it felt like a city that was kind of floating in space, you know, not necessarily tied to the trials of a lot of other places.
Totally agree. Well, let's hear what Phoebe has to say about growing up in Toronto and what it takes to be an artist manager in today's music industry.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Salvador. I'm an artist manager based in Toronto, New York, and LA.
When you're on an airplane and you're flying somewhere, so what do you do? What do you say? And how do you explain that to people who may not actually be in the music industry?
First and foremost, I'm a manager, and I guide people's careers in the arts, and then primarily music. And then secondly, like I've started branching into things. You know, I've been in this long enough to realize that you need equity in this game to last or to have something to retire on. So, you know, I've run a publishing company. Now we're starting a new publishing company. And I'm also starting a little record label, but I haven't, you know, it's all in the works currently. But primarily it's my management clients that I've had management clients for the last 17 years, I think is how long I've been working on music.
Phoebe, what was it like growing up in Toronto?
Growing up in Toronto was really helpful, especially in that time. There was such diversity. I actually forgot that I was someone of color. Does that make any sense?
As someone who was here in the 90s as well, in Toronto, there was no better place on earth to be because you did forget. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. It wasn't until I went to college in the US, and then most of my career has been mostly living and working in the US, but for Canadian companies and also on my own. But it wasn't until I was in the US that I realized I was, you know, I mean, really the truth is it hasn't been maybe the last 10 years where I realized I was like, oh, I'm someone of color and I'm a woman. And I started my career in music when I was 23, so I was really young. I just kind of went with it. It took a colleague of mine who said, oh my God, I can't believe you went to Nashville and you did such a great job. You were out there for 6 weeks. And I said, what do you mean? Like, I was just doing my job. And they're like, you're like Asian and you're, you know, and I was like, oh, that part, you know, I just never thought about it until recently. Looking back on it, I've been in some meetings where I was like, oh, maybe that's why I didn't get further in a conversation. Not only being of color, but also being a woman. But I didn't know that, you know, like I would just.
And so is that something that you've looked at retrospectively in detail and in depth over the last couple of years or in the last several months, because there is much more of a climate to do that? And if you have, what's that found you? What has that brought to you, if anything?
Courage, really. It's brought me courage to do anything I want at this point, especially at a time where there's a lot of mandates to be more inclusive to both women and to people of color. And, you know, I think ultimately I'm in this business to help tell stories, whether it's me or help my clients tell stories through music. And I think it's more important than ever to have diverse voices. You know, my problem with the Canadian music business, like there's a lot of talent, but the business is the same people have the same positions for a very long time. And there is no checks and balances, you know, to perform excellently. And I know that there's a lot of people that now operate independently and not within the system.
So Phoebe, in your opinion, what would you say are the greatest challenges facing artists today?
I think there's social media presence. I think, you know, if you're an artist and you don't like to be online, or you're not like a sensationalist kind of like personality, it's really difficult for you to maintain a social media presence. You know, so some of those artists, the artists that are not very good at marketing, they have the hardest time.
Is there a future for artists who cannot also be a brand and be social and be widely amplified on social media? Does music still count just for music, or are we past that now?
I think if we're talking about the Hot 100, then no. But there's also the flip side of the music business that's really interesting that SoundCloud has created, avenues like SoundCloud and being able to also just like upload on TuneCore or something right up to like any of the DSPs. You can have a career. If you're just, if you're a musician, you can have a career, you could tour, you can have plays, you can do those things, but it's just being realistic with yourself about what kind of artist you want to be and like where you want to be, where you like how big you want to be and where you see your trajectory.
Would you manage someone who you knew was so incredible at getting themselves out there and getting the views, the eyeballs, and really becoming an influencer, but their artistic merit as a musical thing was maybe not up to the level that you're used to? And then equally, someone who is so musically gifted but has no ability to get that attention or desire. Are either of those artists you could work with?
I would love to manage all the great artists that I've come across that are really talented, but then I couldn't make a living doing that. Some of these very talented musicians, their artist project might not do a lot, but then they produce and they songwrite. And then on the flip side, what you're asking, if like somebody on TikTok is, a really gifted marketing person, not the best like music, doesn't produce the best music, I can't really work with people who are not very good I don't like musically.
That's fair.
Because you want to wake up every day and be excited to work on that project. And what music will we remember, right? Like, what music will history remember?
So COVID hits, you've got this great idea called diversity in music. And part of that was really to give a list of eligible people of color who could play a role.
How can you make commitments to make changes in your work environment, which are going to require you to hire differently? At the same time, we're laying everybody off because we're in the midst of a pandemic. And I saw Airbnb had launched a website. They had just laid off, I think, like 1,000 people. And they'd created a website, which was a directory of the people that they had furloughed or laid off. And basically what Airbnb was saying is that they're all rock stars. They worked for us and they should have jobs. And if you have a job for them, please hire them because they need work. And I was so blown away by that because in our industry, we're doing the same thing, but it was a secret. I said, you know what, this should exist in music. There should be a directory of people that need employment, and it'd be an easy place for a hiring manager when they are going to start hiring again to go and query and search for a marketing person in New York that's looking for a job and be able to connect with that person. Just literally just the other day, I was at one of the very first conferences that's happened post-COVID, music conferences. And I was there and a young man walked up to me and he said, "Are you Jonathan Azu?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "I just wanted to let you know that I actually was hired from somebody that found me through your website." And this was, I hadn't been out in the public yet. So I hadn't had anybody walk up to me to say that they had seen this site or used this site. So I was so blown away when he told me that. Wow. I hope we found a lot of people jobs, but if it was just one person makes a difference.
As we're coming out of COVID into whatever is next, what do we need to be armed with?
I think we all have to hold each other accountable. I mean, our entire industry needs to hold each other accountable. I love everything that we're talking about. I really respect the fact that companies have put themselves out there and said, we're going to make change. We're going to make financial commitments. We're going to make changes inside our organizations. But a lot of these companies are privately held. There's a handful that are publicly held, right? That have, a lot of them have board of advisors or they have actual proper board, but who holds them accountable? When major company announces we're going to go from X to Y, with diversity initiatives, we're going to hire, X more vendors. We're going to put Y more minorities on board seats. And let's just say they don't hit those metrics. What happens? Nothing. They just try harder. And that's the part that I'm concerned about. We need the ability for our industry to hold each other accountable.
So what's next? You're involved in so many things. What's the next 6 to 12 months looking like for you?
We're going to continue our diversity initiatives of how can we make sure that our industry is more diverse. The one other initiative that I've just started to work on recently is the health inequities and making sure that in our community that people are getting access to healthcare. If we're going to invest money and time into our artists, we need to invest money into time into their physical and their mental health. And that's going to be a big initiative for us going into the back half of 2021 and definitely into 2022.
The industry as a whole, the future of music, what's next in music? What do you think are a couple of those touch points?
A couple of things. One is there'll be stories that are going to come out of this last 15 months that will be told through music. I always say music's my weapon, and I think when I say it's a weapon, it's a weapon for people to get through things. It's a weapon for change, and there's no doubt that music was the soundtrack to what everybody went through over the last 15 months. And artists were writing more music in this past 15 months that will be coming out. And it's not just the pandemic. It's not just, the challenges that we have around race in this country, but it's so many other things. So to me, what's next in music is really that pure passion coming out through those songs. And then for those of us that work on the other side of the fence, on the business side of the fence, I think this last 15 months has taught us why we do what we do.
I first saw Gavin Brown when he was drumming with Danko Jones 25 years ago, probably more, in a parking lot off Queen Street West in Toronto. Since that time, Gavin has gone from drummer to writer to producer, working with some of the biggest names in the music industry, like Mother, Metric, 3 Days Grace, Billy Talent, so many more. We caught up with Gavin to talk to him about what it's taken to go from performer to music executive.
Sitting in the drum chair for years, I was a supporter. I provided a support role for whatever songs were being played by whatever artists in whatever forum, whether it was in a studio setting or a live setting. It was a supportive one. And I could also separate myself and see what was going on around in a bit of a meta kind of way. Because, frankly, playing drums isn't that hard. Don't tell anybody. But, I learned a lot about what people, I watched the audience. I was an audience watcher. And that's really informed everything I've done ever since. What does the audience want? Turning into a songwriter and a producer was a support role. I was helping people, see their vision, and first clarify their vision, and then find the process that was important. And whatever roads we were trying to follow, and then executing that vision.
There's more of a sense of empowerment than there ever has been. Yet within that empowerment, there's more competition than there ever has been. And so there is just so much more to cull through.
It's a very interesting time in the music business. The democratization of the internet, and creativity and content creation and the dissemination of your songs is as easy as ever, but that doesn't make it easy. I heard something recently, someone on an Instagram post or something said, every Friday, which is New Music Friday and Spotify, you need a Walmart to fill. There's so many songs available every Friday. It used to be, the new songs that would come out would be just in the front window of your local Sam the Record Man. Now you need a Walmart size every week to figure out what's going on. The barriers to entry seem to be less than they were, and yet there's so much more. So traditional music industry, the hurdles are different than they used to be. And now you need X amount of traction on all of your socials. You need to build the machine. You need to build your brand to such an extent, that you're on fire. And then, then Universal or Warner or Sony or whoever will come in and pour gasoline on that fire. The other part of the situation that we identified, which is what's next, is the notion of, where are these copyrights held presently? Where does the money flow right now? And for the most part, it flows outside of Canada. This is the beginning of the most lucrative period in the history of copyright. And not only do we have streaming revenues increasing at a dramatic rate, Spotify's reporting quarterly earnings up 15% quarterly, let alone Apple and Deezer and Tidal. Then you add Peloton and TikTok and all the UGC stuff on YouTube. And what does it take to become The Weeknd versus what does it take, and have 68 million monthly listeners? Or what is it? Or I'm going to put a song out through, DistroKid, and I'm going to have, 550 monthly listeners.
I'd love just to hear your thoughts around what's next in music around diversity and inclusion of previously very marginalized individuals and groups.
Let's just look at the raw stats. The Weeknd and Bieber and Drake are the top 10 artists in history, basically, at this point. It's an unbelievably diverse, I'll call it Canadian, the diversity and inclusion should be like a foregone conclusion. There should be no, yes, we need to have this dialogue, but for us at Kilometer, it's first and foremost, that's all we're looking for is an exact reflection of what Canada is.
We've got one last performance, and it's someone who I think is truly remarkable. Have you heard of William Prince?
I do know William Prince. I met him. I saw him perform first at the Secret Path show, and I met him that night. And I think his performance, it took all the air out of everyone's lungs in the room that night. I mean, it was just, everyone was just breathless. It was amazing.
The truth is, I'm still deathly afraid of this song I'm gonna sing. Oh, who would have known all these things would one day lead me here? I feel all things in my life have been connected up until this moment. It was today I learned that Gord Downey has the same birthday as my father. And the reason that I sing, the reason I play guitar, and I think of my son. I think of the first few pages of Secret Path where a boy's hair was cut and this stark look of panic takes over. And as my first read through, and it broke me. And I don't think Gord would want me to be nervous. I don't think Gord would want me to feel ashamed of how I sing the song. And just for our sons, just for our sons, sons and daughters, sons and daughters. So I'll sing it like I sing it in the hotel. You know that they just can't resist. No man could make them feel nervous, and they put zero into it, and their country doesn't exist. Son, when you dance, I'll be on your shoulder, and you feel it, son. When you dance, I'll be on your shoulder, and you feel it. something stirs in your heart, feeling so strong and intense. Something occurs in your heart. There is an onyx sentence. Don't stop wishing what you wish, even as the world convulses. Says even as the world convulses. Don't stop wishing what you wish. Don't stop wishing the things you wish. And something stirs in your heart, feeling so strong and intense. Something occurs in your heart. There is an onyx sentence.
So Jimmy, as a musician, producer, and creative person, I can only imagine what the next little while is going to be like for you and the band as the world opens up. On a more personal level, I'm curious as to what your perspective is on what life is going to be and where you see it all going for you.
Me, my wife, Emily, we were sitting having dinner after we'd sort of like got up north, and we were sort of like holed up in the country and thought we were going to be, up here for a month, and we still haven't left. But, and my wife's ended up saying, like, I wonder if we'll look back and think these are the good days. Like this is the good moment, and that really kind of resonated in that, like, we don't actually know when the good moment is. You never really do. And I think that music is a similar thing. For me, creatively speaking, I've always tried to not really look at the future or the past. I'm not in the business of betting on the future. I'm in the business of making the most succinct expression of the moment.
What's been really remarkable for me in exploring what is next in music is that oftentimes, like is sort of the old adage in rock and roll, what's next is sort of what's already come.
One of the things we touched on was that there used to be a lot of lines between genres of music, and I think those lines extended to lines between different cultures, and I think that those things are all being broken down, and I think that that's a beautiful way for humanity to move into the future. So I'm just excited to see what comes and what it sounds like and what it feels like and what the next generation of artists can do to make the world a better place.
On that beautiful note, really, what a perfect way to end our time together. I want to thank all the musicians, performers, ambassadors, and music industry leaders for joining us. Very special thanks to RBC Future Launch, RBC Emerging Artists, our friends at Music Publishers Canada, and of course, Jimmy Shaw. This has been Ensemble Volume 15, What's Next in Music. On behalf of everyone at Ensemble, I'm Byron Kent Wong. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you very soon.